Open our bay doors.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What would you do with the brain if you had one?
Do? Why, if I had a brain, I could...
Miles per hour.
I could while away...
46.56 degrees.
We're going to open up to the audience in a few minutes, but I want to ask a few questions. This was the first time I got to watch the movie all the way through with my special guest down here on the floor, so it was 2 thumbs up for that. Dr. Marco, why don't you share a little bit of your background, how you got into this specific field, and what's going on in San Francisco in the Bay Area?
Great, thank you. So I've always been interested from the time that I was little. I started reading Oliver Sacks books. Well, maybe not that little. But when I went to some Oliver Sacks fans. And so when I was in college, I started down the path trying to figure out what you wanted to do. And I was a psychology major. And when I was sort of second year, I took my abnormal psychology course. And I got fascinated by schizophrenia and how the brain sometimes starts off working out okay, and then something changes in the way the brain is functioning, and the way you perceive the world changes. Mm-hmm. And so I started as a research assistant, is how we all start out kind of, and doing schizophrenia research. And then I was in that process, sort of finishing up my, my undergrad, and a psychiatrist said to me, Elisa, if you want to do more than study people with brain differences, you're going to need to get a medical degree. I thought, oh no, I didn't do any of my undergraduate, medical degree classes. So I went all the way back and did the required courses, and I got my medical school degree at UCSF in San Francisco, and I started down the path of seeing patients as a medical student, and I thought I was going to be a neurologist at this point because I was interested in how the brain functions and how the brain doesn't function. And I realized that I wasn't actually somebody who was going to be taking care of adults, because I realized that what I was really interested is in how the brain developed differently, not how the brain changed over time. And so I was really lucky, and we have an incredible child neurologist at UCSF, Donna Ferrero, who's now the head of our children's hospital, the head of all of our pediatrics. And I went and I spent time with Donna, and she said, Elisa, you're a child neurologist. And so that's how I realized that I was a child neurologist. And then I finished my training, and I was seeing patients, and I was sort of doing what child neurologists do. And I was sitting with the family, and I wanted to talk about, doctors don't always know. I wanted to talk about the child's seizures. And the mom said, no. What I need help with is cutting his fingernails and giving him a bath. Cannot stand the touch to his head, to his fingers. I have to do it while he's sleeping. I have to cut his hair when he's sleeping. He can't stand the vacuum cleaner. He can't stand automatic flushing toilets. And so, I'm a neurologist. I'm trained as a neurologist. We like to think about the why. And so from that point on, I really started to think about the why of the differences in the way that our kids are taking in information from the world, sound, touch, visual information. And so that's what sort of has formed the basis of the research I do. So I see patients half my time, both in Marin and in San Francisco for UCSF, and the other half my time I do brain imaging and genetics work, and some cognitive training with video games, which is just starting up, and trying to measure by looking at the brain whether we're helping.
What did you think of the movie about how they reached Owen? This was mom and dad figuring this out.
All I know is that I kept thinking my 15-year-old daughter would be saying, don't cry, you're going to have to get up there, your mascara is all going to be running down your face.
Okay, I just want to say, did Aladdin come to you and give you one magic wish? Because you barely look 19, so I'm just saying. And I know I don't have my glasses on, but you barely look 19.
I'm old enough that I used to read here, and now I read out here.
All right. So I'm going to ask Andrew, and then we're going to get to you, Lauren.
Okay.
I'm saving the best for last. How's that?
Perfect.
Andrew, you got to see part of this movie before, and you actually met Owen. Is that true?
Yeah. He came to Pixar, and they showed the movie, and we got to take him all around Pixar, and I got to meet with him and hang out with him in my office, and he got an amazing day, of just seeing all of Disney and Pixar, and so it was really incredible, and talking to his parents too. So.
Oh, and his sketchbook, though, he's quite artistic with his character drawings, isn't he?
He actually, that story is really good, and I would actually want to see that as a movie, and he can draw really well, and he's very, very entertaining, and he has an incredible imagination. So I hope they make that movie.
Yeah, and memorization.
Oh, he will.
Yeah. And when he was watching the movie, was that the first time he watched it? Was that Pixar, or had he experienced the movie?
I think that they had seen it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was he happy with how the outcome was?
Yeah. Everybody was, the father, Ron, he kept in touch with me, and he teaches at Harvard, and, he invited me over there as well, and what a nice man and an incredibly talented storyteller himself. So I think that's where his son gets it.
Yeah, and Owen used a lot of movies that are older Disney. So is he up to date with Big Hero 6 and Monsters University and Mike?
I don't know. It's he likes the Pixar movies, but I think that there's something that resonates with those older Disney movies and the simplicity, and they're classics, and there's a reason why. And the fact that they're hand-drawn, maybe. So I think that there's a graphic quality to the storytelling there that is connecting with him way more than, say, the Pixar movies, even though he's a big fan. But he likes it all, Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Lauren, now it's your turn. So you've shared a little bit about your bio, and you also shared that you like acting. And you want to share a little bit about some of your acting, your plays, your theatrical?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I
he's got his mic.
I got a microphone, Andrew. Sorry. Okay. So anyway, I actually got to do acting for 15 amazing and incredible years with Broadway-bound kids based in Sonoma. Now, by show of hands, how many of you have heard of Broadway-bound kids? Anybody?
There we go.
All right, not bad. Very good. So I got to start in a lot of stage productions, and I just had an incredible run. There were some parts that I did like, though.
Well, go share.
Well, I got to be Corny Collins in Hairspray. I got to be Starkey the Pirate in Peter Pan. Let's see, who else I got to be?
A Wizard of Oz, you shared.
Oh, I got to be in The Wizard of Oz, which is my favorite play. Of all the plays I've done, Wizard of Oz was my favorite.
Okay, can I ask you about growing up? Because you shared a little bit that you didn't really start to talk till 4 years old.
That's absolutely true.
And with mom and dad and the school system, what were some of the troubling parts, and what were some of the good parts?
Well, elementary school at first was challenging at first, but I actually used to be sensitive to loud noises, but since I'm actually a courtesy clerk at Raley's back in Napa, I pretty much do okay with loud noises.
Yeah. Do you get people yelling at you?
Sadly, no.
Sadly?
No. It's never happened.
Oh, good. Well, that's a good thing. And with school, how was it? What were the subjects you excelled in?
Well, I got to succeed in music, but later in college, though, not so well in math and English, just in more the performing arts field.
So that's your specialty. Right. Do you draw?
I do. I love to draw.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what about the radio station?
Oh, I'm actually on 2 radio stations here in Northern California. Now, how many of you listen to KSVY radio in Sonoma? Anybody?
Oh,
no?
No Sonoma listeners.
Oh.
All right, what's the other one? Give us
well,
another
I'm
try.
actually on there in Sonoma. I record public service announcements. And by another show of hands, how many of you here listen to KVON? Anybody?
Oh, there you go. Now you got fans. Now you got fans.
Yeah, so I'm actually on KVON 9 to 10 a.m. on Tuesday mornings with Judd Finkelstein of Judd's Hill Winery. I'm the trusty sidekick. Or as I put it out, I'm kind of like Hank Kingsley to Larry Sanders. But Larry Sanders himself, Gary Shandling, has passed away recently. God bless him.
Yeah,
so,
that's good.
There's for you, Gary. Hey now.
I love that. Dr.
And
Marco.
such an enjoyable time.
Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Marco, when you're working with families, as they're growing up, how do you help reach reach them? What is there, I know everything is a little bit different, and can you explain a little bit about the spectrum with autism and, where we are today?
Yeah. I guess I have a full confession to make, which is that I don't think of my kids as whether they have autism or don't have autism, because in my practice, I see kids that come in with all different sort of arrangements of challenges for all different kinds of reasons. Sometimes we are able to identify the reasons, and other times we're not. And so what I do when a kid comes in, family comes in, the first thing we do is just try and figure out where are the areas of strength for that child, and there's always something that you can find that's the area where you're going to build. And then where are the areas of challenge? What are the things that are making it hard to kind of get to the next step? And as a neurologist, we tend to think kind of linearly as opposed to artists. We like go, nah, nah, and then when we're done with that, we go to the next thing. So I go gross motor, fine motor, language, social, sensory, attention, and I try and figure out where are the kids' abilities and what are the things that are harder by domain. And that's how I think about my kids, rather than whether they fit a label of autism or not, in part because autism really speaks about social and communication, and it doesn't tell you about gross motor or fine motor. And you could see for Owen, fine motor is really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. You could tell how laborious it was for him to write those letters. I would have got him keyboarding.
Ah.
And maybe now dictation is becoming, anyway, so that's how I think about my kids. I kind of lump them all into a big group of neurodevelopmental challenge, and then we figure out where their strengths and challenges are, and we go from there. Again, neurologists like to think about cause. Mm-hmm. So rather than looking at the behavior and saying, oh, this is autism, I look at a kid and I say, okay, can I figure out something about why this kid is having challenges? Is there something in their history that speaks to a brain injury? That might be our clue. Is there something about their genetic traits or family history that might be our clue? Do we need to do an MRI, an EEG, genetics? And then we go in and try and figure out how we're going to help the mom cut his fingernails and things like that.
And the power of imagination, that's strong with kids and adults. I mean, I still believe in pixie dust. So,
Can you fly?
My son's not here. I flew once.
Okay.
Around the room.
Yeah, I was curious. We can talk about it later. I want to hear about it.
So, Andrew, let's talk about Pixar and animation. And when you guys are developing a character, do you look at people in your industry? Do you look at kids, because they all have personalities. How does that come about?
Well, the way that we develop characters is, first off, it's always people that surround you. Like, if I'm developing Mike or whomever, I'm always looking at my family, or we reference the people that we know, their gestures, the themes, all the themes come up. It's very interesting how characters develop. They start off really different from the beginning, in terms of how a character might be, and then they end up totally changed by the last screening. Usually these screenings have about 8 screenings, right? So we're always just looking at things that inspire us, things that are connected to us, and trying to put that into there. Yeah.
And Lauren, when you're going through all your artistic things that you love to do, what would be your next step? What would you like to do next? You've been on the radio. You've acted in plays. Do you have a dream?
Well, maybe to do some voiceovers, but actually one thing that we have actually not discussed yet.
Okay.
How many of you are familiar with Napa Valley TV? Can I get a show of hands? Anybody?
Yeah.
All right, very many of you. What you all don't know about me also is that I am the announcer on the Napa Show with Artie Party on Channel 28.
Oh, yeah. Wow, you are multi-talented young man.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think that's pretty cool. I think it's time that we open it up to the audience.
Oh, sure.
And let's see if we have some audience questions. And you can direct your questions to whomever you'd like. So I'm looking for hands. We got one way down here. Can we come on down? Come on down, Daisy. And when you talk into microphone, if you keep the tail out.
Like this?
Yep, you need the tail to fly.
Okay.
Yep. There you go.
My question is for you, Lauren.
Okay.
So I've done a lot of acting in plays too through high school, and I really loved it. But besides just loving performing, my favorite part was sort of the camaraderie and connection that you build with the other actors and the crew members. And I wanted to know what that's like for you and how I guess easy or hard a time you have like building those special relationships on stage.
Well, you build amazing friendships together, and it turns out if you build a friendship together, if you all work together as a team, then the production turns out to be a marvelous success.
Yay. That's a great answer. Anybody else got some questions, comments, questions for Ann? You don't get a panel like this every day to ask what you're thinking or comments that you have. Anybody? Oh, we got one right there. Daisy?
I'm coming from the educational aspects of...
Can you talk louder into the microphone, please?
Sorry, sure. I'm coming from the educational aspects of working with children with disabilities, and one of the stumbling blocks that we'd run across oftentimes was the lack of imagination because they were so concrete and everything was black or white. Do you have any experience, input, how that develops, how is best to develop that?
I think that's for you, Dr. Marco.
Okay. So here I'm going to reference something that one of my mentors, Bryna Siegel, uses as a concept, and it's the edge of the wedge concept. And this concept is that everything has to start from an edge. And from that edge, you build outwards. And so, for example, I mean, Owen's easy, and some kids are. You know, you see what it is they love. They love trucks. They love Thomas. They love... It can be, one of my favorites is I had a guy who came, and this is like 4 or 5 years ago, and I did an intake. He was, I think, like 12, and I said, okay, you know, it's really nice meeting you, and would you be willing to come back and come see me again sometime? He said, sure, I'd love to come back. And I was like, this is great. I really established a connection with this kid. I didn't know because, you know, I wasn't getting a lot from him in terms of eye contact or gesture or language. And I said, well, what would you like to do when we come back? And he said, will you have that clock here? And I said, yeah, definitely. I have that clock here. Do you like the clock? He said, I love that clock. So for him, it's about clocks. And you use that clock. And there's big clocks and little clocks. And there's digital clocks. And there's clocks with big hands and clocks that look like a teacup. And, you know, you take that clock and maybe you make that clock have a smile on it. And you bring in the friends in the family, and each clock is somebody in the family, or maybe it's the clock meets the truck. And so you have to take that edge and build out that wedge. So that's one. There's the other things you can walk through. I was also really glad to see Michelle Garcia Winters in there. She was the social skills expert, and she's actually a California expert. We can get her, and her thinking, social thinking is what she calls it, has been permeated into many of the schools in this area. They use her concepts. She uses, do you know Michelle Garcia Winters? She uses comics and cartoons as her emotions, and so there's like rock brain and flex brain. And so instead of having to say, how are you feeling? You're being really inflexible, or, you know, you're really stuck. You can say, are you feeling a little like rock brain right now? Let's see if we can move a little bit more towards flex brain. And it makes it so that you can talk about it, and it also makes it a little bit less scary. And so Michelle Garcia Winters is a huge asset. And you're shaking your head so you know her. So there's a lot of different strategies. I'm happy to talk offline too.
Yeah. And Andrew, did you have anything to add to that?
I just had an interesting story to share. You know, a lot of the animators work on these movies for years, and we get frustrated and we get hard. They're hard. They take a long time, and one of the animators who saw that film for the first time, it really affected him, because one of the producers one day came in from Disney. His name was Don Hahn, and the animator's name was Reg Bordage. He worked on the parrot character.
Yeah.
And he said, hey guys, I know this is hard, but I want you to read some of these letters. And he showed a stack of all these letters from fans and how much these movies do connect. And there was just like bags of them. They get sent to Disney. And a lot of times when we're working, we just have no idea about how people really react to them and care about them. And I would say that this film had a huge effect on a lot of the animators that worked on those films. And it's really a testament to the storytelling and also just the way that Disney thinks about films and Pixar. It's what Disney used to say, for every laugh there's a tear. And I think that's the difference between those films and a lot of different films. They're really going for the heart. You know, so
Yeah. Well, and they had the villains and the good guys and the sidekicks. The sidekicks became the number one part of the movie, that he felt that he was the protector of the sidekicks. So I think that was fabulous. I know with Inside Out we talked about that movie because that was about emotions and what's going on in kids' brains. Yeah. Yeah, you want to share? Well, Andrew, can you share a little bit about how that movie, where the concept came from?
Sure.
And then we'll get Dr. Marco's reaction.
You know, thematically, the difference between Pixar and most other studios is that the films are director-driven, meaning that they don't get internal scripts. They're usually driven by the director's idea. They usually pitch 3, and then the studio greenlights 1. And it always comes from whatever the director is feeling at that time. Mm-hmm. So Pete Docter on Monsters Incorporated was dealing with like a new baby, and what do you do with a baby, you know? And so that kind of something came out of that experience. And I think on Inside Out, the theme was really about I don't get it. I don't know what is going on in behind my child's head.
Right.
You know, when I talk to her, sometimes she just stares, and he wanted to kind of understand that. And that's kind of where that idea started from, and it just grew. And 4 years of story development, they really hammer on it, and not until the very end do sometimes things get fixed. For instance, joy for the longest time was paired with fear.
Voiced by Amy Poehler.
Right.
There you
well,
go.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so had that movie been Joy and Fear, it probably wouldn't maybe have been as powerful as having joy and sadness.
Yes.
So that was like a fix that they had to do. For years, it was like joy and fear. So.
And Dr. Marco, what do you think about that movie? Do you use it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it first came out, it was really something that people were watching and seeing, and it was a really nice way of connecting with the kids who were coming in. So I see a whole range of kids, and obviously some kids are little, some kids are older, some kids can speak what's on their mind, some kids can type what's on their mind and then sort of read what they have typed, and some kids can really speak fluently about what's on their mind. And especially in the kids who are having trouble speaking about their emotions, I think it really gave them a voice.
Yeah.
It was, so you should know that. It's super powerful. Especially like in the end when they had the dogs and the dogs had their thoughts in their minds. That was like my favorite. You got to watch the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Lauren, did you like that movie?
Actually, it's surprising. I never saw it. I only saw the previews for it on the TV.
Oh, we got to get you to see that movie and see what you
Probably.
think. Yeah, there you go. We had another question. Do we have one down here somewhere? Yep. Can you come on down, Stephen? Thank you.
Thank you. I guess for Dr. Marco, just an informational question. I've heard the expression autistic spectrum disorder, and I don't really know what that means. I can assume that it means a broad range of effects or affects or whatever, but could you elaborate just a little bit on what that means in terms of the types of people that you work with and just how broad that really is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the terminology has had a rich and varied history itself. And so you can remember in this movie, when he was first diagnosed, they gave him the label pervasive developmental disorder, which you kind of like, what? What does that mean? Because, I mean, who really knows what that means? It's sort of, it's one of those words that I think originally, so there's this big book of labels called the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. We're on 5 now. We were on 4 TR, and then we were on 4. And so every few years, they update the list of labels. And it started off that autism that was considered to be sort of a childhood onset schizophrenia. And over time, it's sort of evolved in its labels. And actually, the label that Owen got originally, PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, no longer even exists in the new book, the new revision of the book. Now, everybody from the kids who have no language to the kids who are fluent but have significant difficulty with their social communication, sort of the nuance of eye contact and gestural, will all fit under this umbrella of autism spectrum disorder. You have to have challenges with social skills and the communication aspects of the social communication. There's a second layer of the diagnosis that includes repetitive interests and behaviors, and also the sensory processing piece, which is obviously what I'm particularly interested, because I think it's part of what drives the whole condition for a lot of our kids. And so when people say autism spectrum disorder, actually now they actually say autism spectrum disorders, and it is fairly broad. And I think in some ways that's a good thing, because the more people who are fit under that label, the more likely they are to get services in school and in the community. The ASD label is like gold for community services. And, you know, standing on my soapbox, what I would say is in some ways that's fantastic. And you just have to make sure that the services that are given are actually appropriate for that child, because 40 hours a week of drilling kinds of therapy to get a child to, you know, point to the tail or point, you know, over and over again is not obviously what would have worked well with Owen. And so dialing in the right kind of treatment for the right child, regardless of the label that gets stamped on them, I think is really important. And so autism spectrum disorders is simply a label. You have two sort of main aspects of criteria, and each one has a couple of points below it. And the first one is all about social communication, and the second one is more about repetitive interests and behaviors.
I have a question for Lauren. Lauren, when you were going to school, did you have, you know, was it easy to make friends? Did you have helpers that helped you? Because you said math was a little hard for you. How was it going through the Napa school system?
Well, I pretty much had a good time with the Napa school system, with the help of a one-on-one aide, though. Because like I said earlier, elementary school was a little bit challenging, but I slowly but steady managed to progress myself. And I got better and better.
And did you like middle school, high school better? What was, or college, I guess? Which one was your favorite?
Well, probably the transition between elementary and middle school was a little bit tough, but I liked Napa High.
You like Napa?
I did. Hey, class of 2010 right here.
Yeah, that's what we want to hear. Great. We have any more questions? We got time for a couple more. If anybody wants to make a comment or question, we got one way over here. I saw a hand up.
I think this is probably for Dr. Marco.
Can you talk into the microphone,
okay.
Carla? Thank you.
Dr. Marco, you said something about fine motor coordination in writing, and in the movie how difficult it was. And my son was dyslexic, and he had that kind of difficulty. But Owen also could draw very well, and there was none of that difficulty in his drawing at all. But making letters was altogether different.
So you want me to comment on why that
yes.
is? Yeah. So one of the things that sometimes makes me crazy when I'm sort of reading the expert says this or that is when they come up with something that they really have no idea about. And I think to a certain extent, the sort of top level answer is that it is different when you are, so you could see when he was writing, he was really working hard to come up with his thoughts. And so to a certain extent, his capacity was maxed, and the fine motor control was what you saw come out last and kind of take the hit. Whereas I think with his drawing, he does that at his own time and with his own leisure and at his own direction. And I think there really is a difference in how we do when we are, well, optimally regulated and working at our sort of just right place. And so to a certain extent, we're pretty good when we're working at around 80% of our sort of max capacity. But you're hungry, you're tired, you're stressed, and the things that used to come easy or normally come easy are much less readily available. And I think if you're taking in information or trying to put together thoughts, and that's hard, then handwriting is going to be tricky. And the other thing is that we often will see kids who can do things like handwriting slowly and really well, but when they're then pressed, and this is maybe back to an education sort of application, when they're pressed to take notes and it's coming at a pace that just isn't their pace, that's where you see it fall apart. Or where they have to take auditory information in and put it out in a fine motor output, or visual information in and fine motor out. But for him, he was going from inside of his head, which we know is a very rich and robust place, straight to out. So he wasn't coming in from the environment and then back out, and I think that's different. But we don't have any functional imaging for that one yet.
I'm going to ask Lauren. Lauren, what would you say to kids who have some difficulty expressing what's going on and where they're having problems, and for families that would be helpful, like when you were growing up? What would you say to the families and the kids?
Well, just be yourself. Just do what you can in life. Life can be tough at times, but just try and make it through.
And parents, how would you tell parents how can they help? How can they help the kid?
Just guide your kid through marvelous times and success.
Is everything success?
Not always.
Yeah.
But it is a hard question for me to answer.
Yeah, that's true. But you get to talk to people all the time.
And that's why I like doing public speaking.
Yes, and you're a very positive role model for them. So that's my comment is, how would you encourage other kids to stand up and enjoy what you do?
Just be yourself, and you always got to take a good fight. You try to make it through.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. And with that, we can't top that tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So I'd like to thank my panel. Thank you all for coming. If anybody'd like to ask Lauren or Dr. Marco or Andrew any questions, they'll be around and out in the lobby. And thank you so much for being a part of Science on Screen. Thank you.